we're going to talk with my notes here about 18th century fashion and how it relates to dolls. Now, before I get roasted here on the internet, I am neither a dress or costume historian expert. I'm not a subject matter expert. I have only read articles online, looked at pictures, and watched other videos, which there is a plethora of content creators out there who are skilled in the historical niche. So I would suggest taking a look and checking out some of their things. So what started this was the Virtual Doll Convention has put out a historical subscription box, and I feel like this is kind of a neat idea. The last time I remember being excited about anything historical doll related was when I was maybe like, I don't know, 10, and the American Girls came out and they had the stories for each one. Now, this is an American Girl, and there is a story for each, time period, but the precedence is Grace, which I should have brought Grace down instead of Evangeline. But Grace is traveling through time, and she picks a book off the shelf and she goes to different years throughout time. And then the Virtual Doll Convention team has put together subscription boxes with an outfit that correlates to that time period. So I'm not here to roast anybody. I'm not here to do a hit or miss. We're just going to talk about historical fashion and how it relates to dolls. So one thing to take in consideration, she is only 16 inches tall. Her chest is like 7.5 inches, maybe a little bit more. Her waist is like 5 inches. So a lot of the historical fashions that you're going to see in the 18th and 19th century, they were built upon. So there's tons of base layers, and you can't really do that on a doll scale because it's going to be too bulky. Fabrics that work for a human are going to be too thick on a 16-inch scale. So it's kind of like Barbie, a little bit better because she's a little bit bigger, but it's kind of like making Barbie clothes, really. So let's talk about it. So you've seen some examples, you kind of know like what we're talking about. An overview from the 1760s. So that was the Virtual Doll Convention's first year that they started with, and they called her Lady Grace. And we're coming off of the Rococo period. So there's been a ton of modern spin-offs for the Rococo period, and you just think gilded glitz and glamour and laces and flowers and florally things. I think of Lady Pompadour. That's really not 1760s, but that's what I think of when I think of Rococo fashion. And you have to also keep in consideration, or what I like to consider, is pretty much in the 18th century, there's two worlds. You have the French and European fashion, which that's what everybody leans towards with their fashion plates. And then you've got the American colonies going on, which all of their fashion styles are going to be similar, but it's all going to be toned down because you have to think of, in America, we don't have lavish access to all of these silks and things like that because there's a trade thing going on. Because we're a European colony, so we're getting taxed on a lot of stuff. So the trade is quite different on the materials that you could get in America versus what you could get in France and Europe. So moving on, some key silhouettes. The robe à la française or robe à la anglaise, a sack back gown, those were really popular. They were kind of phasing out in popularity, and you didn't see them in day wear as much as you would see them in evenings and ball gowns. And I don't have an example. This is one that I made, but basically in a robe a la anglaise, there's two pieces of fabric that kind of come back, and it looks like a big sack laying in the back. I'll insert a picture here so you kind of know what I'm talking about. But like I said, there's lots of undergarment layers going on. So you had a petticoat, you had chemises, and then you had your stays, which was at that time period their version of a corset. And they had, depending on where you were at in your social hierarchy, the stays had straps, like bra straps, or they were strapless. But boned, really tough undergarment material to help make the shape because let's face it, we're people and we don't have a shape like this all the time. So a lot of times you wanted a really large skirt, and the square necklines were really popular because you wanted a low décolletage piece. And then oftentimes you would adjust the modesty and you would put on a scarf or a fichu, which was anything from an actual scarf that was embroidered with, you know, different things, or like a very sheer, what we would consider like a chiffon-y gauze type material, and it would like tuck into your waist and you know, kind of hide your décolletage. And then the fabrics, of course, it's still kind of the same fabrics as previous garments and things. We're still looking at luxurious fabrics like silk, satins, brocades, lots of intricate embroidery, lace everywhere, ribbons, all those types of things. And usually they would like pink the silk. So if you're familiar with sewing, pinking shears, but there was different styles. And so they would pink the silk and then they would pleat it and add it to the front. One of the really popular silhouettes was, this would be a decorative petticoat, and then you would have some sort of overskirt that would either attach to the bodice or would be its own skirt itself. And then the overskirt would open in the front so that you could see the decorative petticoat underneath. And then the time of year, you could always layer the petticoats. One of the undergarments to help fill out the silhouette was panniers, which basically looked like little saddlebags on either side of a lady's hips, and it made the dress kind of flat and poof out a lot on the side. So you're going to get like a very poofy side silhouette, which a lot of people think of Marie Antoinette when they think of those, but really Marie Antoinette was after this time period, and this was also before the American Revolution. So moving on, let's see. Lots of rich colors. I think that's almost the, everybody looks at it. There's a yellow dress at the Met that is one of my favorite 1760s gowns, but it's a very rich color, and you'll see lots of the embroidery and stuff at the time. It doesn't look as bright now, but think about it, hundreds of years, you know, that color is going to saturate over time. And then some of the things that are always fun to think about are the accessories that top off anything. So 1760s, you're looking at, like we were saying, the panniers, lots of ruffles. They had muffs in the wintertime to stick your hands in. Obviously fans for any type of social gathering. Wigs, depending on where you fit in society, depended on the wigs. And so that also leads kind of into the hairstyle. So one of the really popular hairstyles was, they called it frizz, but it was probably like teased in the front so that you had kind of like a voluminous crown and then a bun, or like the side rolls on the side with horizontal curls. The more extravagant hairstyles obviously were meant for evening wear, as something more tapered or being covered with just like a lace bonnet or a gauze type material, a very light material. You would cover your head during the daytime, and you would wear a bonnet, which almost looks like a nightcap. I say bonnet and some people think Little House on the Prairie bonnet, but we're going more towards bonnet as like a nighttime style thing. They also wore flowers, jewels, beads, all sorts of things. And then, like I was saying, the different places. So it's almost like, at least for me in the United States, one side of the United States, West Coast or East Coast, is always a little fashion off. So like one thing will hit really big in California, and then it takes a little while to roll over to New York City, or something will be really popular and really big in fashion, and then it takes like a year to 6 months. Now, the United States of America, the colonies at the time is what they called, they weren't, you know, years back, but they were a good 6 to 12 months, because if you think about it, it's not like the internet now where you can just chime in and see what somebody else is wearing. Everything had to come by a ship. Ships can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. If they get lost, if something gets, you know, stolen, like the transport from one place to the next takes a long time. And the way things were spread was word of mouth, or the fashion plates were brought over on a ship. They didn't have airplanes, anything like that, which is, I guess, if you kind of think about it, kind of to wrap your head around like how news got around everywhere. So at best, America was always, I would say, 6 to 7 months or more behind the European fashion. And so with that being in mind, you were also thinking about in America trading out the practicality versus the opulence. So things aren't as built up as they were in the cities, and it's not as lavish as a palace life or living in the court, because you have to think there was still a monarchy, like a heavy monarchy in France and England and Spain and all over Europe, like that. The kings and queens, like they were still alive and a big part of social, not that they're dead, but they were still a big part of the social impact and how things went. So when you're in a colony, they had the similar styles, but they had to adapt them because of their climate and the resources, like we talked about with the ships and the trading and things like that. And a lot of them were more modest and a lot more functional, because if you think about it, you're in a colony, you don't have access to silk all the time, you don't have access to all of the mantua makers and dressmakers that you would if you were in France or Europe. And you're kind of like in a mucky place. Like being a colonist back in the 18th century was not a glamorous lifestyle at all. Yes, you had your aristocrats in your high society, but I mean, you didn't have a paved cobblestone street. You were probably walking around in a dirt gravel street. There was lots of farming, lots of it rural type things to make your living. You weren't a princess in America. Now, moving forward, some of the key features are obviously going to still be the same. The petticoats and just like simpler gowns and corsets. And I'll try to insert some things here while I'm talking about all of these 1760s. We touched on the rural versus urban. Urban women in cities like Philadelphia and New York, they would probably be more, because they had a little bit more money, would probably have been the ones to adopt the very fancy European clothing styles and have those gowns in their collections. And then the rural women are the ones we were talking about. You're going to probably see more like homespun cloth, more cottons, less embroidery, less brocade type things, and a lot more simpler textiles when it comes to their outfits, which I want to hit on. Some people may roast the virtual doll convention for the historical accuracy of their dress, but I think for a doll scale, they did really good, because she's in a blue brocade dress, and then one of the fashion styles of the time was the elbow length fitted sleeves, and then they would kind of like spill out, and you had lots of laces, and when making the pattern, it's like an oval shape. So you have lots of laces, lots of layers, and it just kind of like looks really pretty and flows out on the sleeve. So I think really for making it a doll scale, they hit the mark. They didn't say that they were coming out to do anything historically accurate. They aimed to make it, fairly accurate, but I think for the scale, it looks really good. And it really does kind of flow into, I like to think that Grace was fitting into more of a European 1760s and that type of a lifestyle. Because of the influence of the social class. You've got your aristocracy and your royalty in Europe, and then in the middle class, like we were talking about in colonial America, it kind of like tapers off. So with her pretty and lavish brocade dress, I think she would probably be more on like the wealthier side, obviously because she was Lady Grace. I think that's what they're hitting on. We talked about the wigs, the fans, the muffs, the headwears, the bonnet style hats, jewelry. Lots of expensive pieces for jewelry. We're talking about cameos and lockets. There was lots of decorative pins that you could pin your scarves and fichus you could wear in a hat. The big brimmed straw hats were starting to become really popular. But all in all, just to recap, the 1760 fashions, I just wanted to highlight a couple of differences between the very lavish styles that you see in some of the portraits and pictures in Europe versus what you were going to see in the colonies. And then I think it's really neat that the virtual doll convention is going back into history, because like I said, I like to look at both sides. Like, I live in America, but a lot of the early fashion was heavily influenced by European fashion. So it's kind of fun to be well-rounded and think of all those things. And since I'm a huge doll nerd enthusiast, as you will, I like dolls, and I think that dolls are always a reflection of their time period. So I have one of the Therald's auction books, which I love these for their pictures, and as a costume maker for dolls, I really like having the picture references. But these are back, 18th century, they were wooden dolls, but you can see, the silhouette, they still tried to, even then, transfer things over and make it so that, it fit a small scale. And I don't even know, these are 18 inches, so a little bit bigger than her, but, she's all wood. This one is probably more of a later 18th century, and she's probably earlier century. Now, Virtual Doll Convention, they recently did some videos where they toured a woman who had an extensive collection of wooden dolls. But this just kind of shows what we were talking about earlier with the ruffles on the sleeves. And this was like in the time period. So this is what dolls looked like while history was like fresh. Like this is their version of our Barbie doll. The open skirt, this is technically a petticoat with all of its decorations and the sleeves, and you can see all of the ribbons and the pleating and stuff like that. And it's on a small scale because she's only 18 inches tall. And then this is I guess a lace bonnet or a lace head wrap. But I just kind of thought that was really neat. Very, very fine early English wooden doll with expressive features and a shapely body. So yeah, that's what the auction house. But I just thought that was kind of neat to share as an experience, because I know dolls have always been there as a fashion portrayal when it comes to outfits and things. And then as a seamstress, I like to sew. So this was a hodgepodge of patterns that came through from Tamara Casey. And some of the patterns that you could probably use for her, she's got one called Opulent. There's another one called the Enchanted Court Gown. And then some of her Claire Fraser gowns that she's put out. But you're kind of, when you're sewing your own 18th century version of this dress, you want to look for something with maybe a square neckline. This one comes to a point in the front, so you could make like a faux stomacher, or you could insert a panel right here that's more decorative, or do some embroidery and then maybe put on these two side seams right here. She's a little bit far away and the stripes kind of hide her. So you can kind of see here, she's still in the process, but she's got two bust side seams. So it would be really easy to transfer over and maybe do some sort of decorative thing here, leave these open and make it look like a faux stomacher or a fake stomacher. And then I was going for the Sleepy Hollow dress when I made this one, and so it was the only one that I had on hand. But same with the sleeves, you could kind of stop them here, and I think it's the court gown or Opulent. The sleeves do have like a kind of a drapey effect right here with various laces and things like that. And then of course this is an overskirt. This is just a tulle petticoat, so you could obviously, sky's the limit, you could change it out. And then also for the ball jointed dolls, there's lots of different patterns and things for panniers and different things. So we're not quite at a hoop skirt, and we're not at the bustle dress with the lobster bustles, but the panniers, they look like little tiny saddlebags on either side. So if you're trying to recreate this for your doll or try to recreate it in miniature, those are some patterns that you can do. Again, when you're working with brocades and silks, you want to be aware of the scale and the size of the pattern. I was always told a good rule of thumb was their hand. So if you hold up a doll's hand next to a pattern, that's going to be how big it would relate to as in your pattern. So, these stripes or whatnot are about a finger width. So in real life, they would probably be about a finger width stripe. So a little bit thicker stripe. Again, all in context, you do you. And yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. We have some really gorgeous gowns that are going to be coming from the Virtual Doll Convention. So if you are a subscriber to them, or you did get their subscription box, I look forward to seeing what she puts out. So thanks, and let me know what you found most interesting about this video. And we are going to try to go on this historical garment journey once every month and explore some of the historical doll garments and things like that as we move forward. So 1760s, Lady Grace, let me know what was your favorite.